All right, good evening, everybody. David Paul with you in the KHOU 11 Weather Center in Houston, Texas, for those of you joining us from across the country or across the globe. We are going to take questions during this tropical update. If you'd like to ask a question, the best and really only way to do that is going to be through Facebook. So if you'd like to ask a question about what's going on in the tropics, go to Facebook, watch us there. We are live, KHOU.com's Facebook page. And that'll be the best way for you to be able to ask a question, and we'll take those in just a little bit. Big view of the tropical Atlantic basin. There are 3 active systems that we are watching this evening. This is an Invest 97L. You can see the spaghetti plots take it into the open Atlantic and turn it north and no threat. 98L, same story. Spaghetti plots take it north out into the open Atlantic, no threat. This is now Tropical Storm Ida in the Caribbean. This is the one that's going to get into the Gulf of Mexico and we think become a hurricane. But this afternoon and this evening, we've gotten a much more clear picture as to where Ida's eventual track is probably going to take her. And we'll get to that here in just a moment. Ida is a tropical storm south of Cuba, just west of Jamaica. Minimal tropical storm, winds of 40 miles an hour. This is the 7 p.m. advisory here on Thursday evening. Moving northwest at 13 miles an hour, pressure 1,006 millibars. It's a minimal tropical storm. And in fact, upon closer inspection, you can see it's lopsided. What's happening is at the mid and upper levels, there's a little bit of shear. Winds are coming out of the southwest, blowing to the northeast, and they've blown the deep convection, the brighter colors on the satellite imagery here, off to the northeast side of the storm. Under these conditions, the storm will not intensify rapidly. And tonight into early tomorrow, we don't expect any rapid intensification as long as it's in that sheared environment. But that is going to change as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. Not only will the environment become unsheared and very conducive for development, but there's plenty of warm water. 84 degrees through the Yucatan Channel, 85 Central Gulf, 86, 87 degrees you get into the North Gulf. And in fact, upon closer inspection, we've got sea surface temperatures near the coast of Louisiana running 88 to 91 degrees. So very warm, a tremendous amount of energy for this system to tap into. And you've probably noticed the computer models, the spaghetti plots, all the tropical models have now come into very tight agreement as to where they think this storm is going to go. Let's go back in time. Well, yesterday, you may remember, we had those plots that were running from Brownsville all the way to Florida. But today, they've all tightened up. What a tremendously tight track we have here. So we have much more confidence that the computers are on to something when they're all suggesting the same eventual outcome. So what changed? You remember, those high-level flights are what changed. So over the Gulf of Mexico yesterday evening and today, Gonzo and an Air Force reconnaissance jet were out there gathering data, measuring the atmosphere ahead of the storm, the atmosphere the storm is going to be moving into. That data has been put into those tropical spaghetti models, and the result is a much tighter forecast. And so we have a good indication that the storm is probably headed for the Louisiana coast, perhaps the southeast Louisiana coast, New Orleans. It may be headed right for you. And in fact, the GFS, the American model, and the European model also both came into tighter agreement as well. The GFS brings a hurricane just about to make landfall southeast Louisiana coast, south of New Orleans, Sunday morning. So this happens into early Sunday morning. You can see that the European model is a little bit behind the GFS, but not too far. It brings a hurricane into the central Louisiana coast, Vermilion Bay, as we head into Sunday night into the wee hours early Monday morning at 3 a.m. for our landfall there. Both have a very similar track, and neither of them are forecast to sit. So it won't be a tremendous inland rainfall event, at least not for Louisiana, southern Mississippi. But on its onset, there will be very heavy rain. Obviously, you've got a hurricane coming in here. The storms move into the mid-Tennessee Valley and mid-Mississippi Valley as we head into Tuesday night. All that has culminated in this forecast track from the Hurricane Center, which brings a strong Cat 2 hurricane. And it would not surprise me if it ended up being a Cat 3 into the southeast Louisiana coast late on Sunday afternoon, early into Monday morning is possible, just sort of splitting the difference between the Euro and the GFS. Now, remember, statistically, when you look at this forecast cone, it is just as likely that the center of the storm could track on the western edge of the forecast cone, just as likely there or in the center or on the east side of that forecast cone. So Lake Charles is still a possibility. Even getting into Biloxi, Mississippi is still a possibility on the right-hand side of that cone. So the track not set in stone, but a lot sharper focus than we had yesterday. Closer view of this, there's New Orleans, there's Lake Pontchartrain, there's Biloxi on the eastern edge of that cone, Lake Charles and Cameron on the western edge of that cone. So Lafayette, you guys could have hurricane conditions going into Sunday night, early Monday morning. This track could even pass near Alexandria. It could still be a weak Cat 1 hurricane at that point into central Louisiana or into Baton, Mississippi. So Mississippi also in play, interior Mississippi, for possible hurricane conditions, especially to the right-hand side of where that center comes in. That's the dirty side of the storm. That's where the strongest winds and usually heaviest rain and surge will be, which will have impacts on the coast here, and we'll talk more about that as we move along. So let's look at the wind field forecast for this. So this is the latest run of the GFS. This is the 18Z, which is similar to the 12Z. It brings this developing, strengthening hurricane sitting right off the southeast Louisiana coast, mouth of the Mississippi River, as we head into Sunday in the early morning hours of Sunday. So this is actually bringing it in a little bit faster now. So Sunday morning landfall there. But you'll notice this counterclockwise rotation around the center of low pressure is going to be pushing wind and waves up and into the Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, even Florida coast. So your surge threat will be from Lake Pontchartrain, New Orleans, Louisiana, all the way through Mississippi, Alabama, and a big chunk of the Florida Panhandle will have increased surf and seas, less as you get further away from the center, but that surge is going to impact even you folks on the coast of Florida. A closer view, here's the wind field at 8 a.m. Sunday morning. So this type of scenario is one that will try to push water up into Lake Pontchartrain, and this is the type of wind field that can cause slosh and surge across Lake Pontchartrain. That is what stressed the levees so much during Katrina in '05 and caused some of that levee damage there. And I'm not forecasting that, I'm just showing you the possibility. This may put stress on the levee system in and across Lake Pontchartrain as it approaches, especially if it does become a Cat 3 at landfall. Here we are, the wind field forecast at 5 p.m. Sunday afternoon. It's centered right over New Orleans and Lake Pontchartrain, and then moves it north into, this run now is a little further east. It moves it north of Jackson, Mississippi as either a weakening hurricane or a strong tropical storm, all the way into Jackson, Mississippi. So this will have impacts well inland. But here's one point I do want to make. I talked about the slosh in Lake Pontchartrain. So at the onset, you've got winds coming in from the east. That piles the water up on the west side of Lake Pontchartrain. And as the storm quickly moves north, now you've got winds blowing in the opposite direction, and that can blow that water that piles up on the west side of Lake Pontchartrain across the lake to the east side. That's the slosh that can happen in these bodies of water when these strong surface winds from a hurricane come in. And it's that slosh of water that can put tremendous pressure on any type of structure, dams, levees that are up against that water sloshing across. So that is a possibility. It's just something I'm thinking about and making sure you're aware of if you're in the New Orleans area. They'll be watching that carefully. Waves offshore and surge will be significant. This is our wind and wave height forecast, and look at the wave heights here on the northeast side of the storm forecast. That's getting into that darker orange color. So we're talking about wave heights in here, 30 to 35 foot swells offshore. This will be a system where I'm sure the oil rigs, folk that work on the rigs out here are already looking at this. They're already looking at this. They have their own METs, and they've already started a process of let's get ready to evacuate our people out on those oil and gas platforms in the Gulf of Mexico, because those are very dangerous waves. And that wave action comes in on top of any type of storm surge, which will be significant. You could easily see up here against the Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama coast, especially in the Mobile Bay, easily see 10 to 12 foot plus of storm surge, depending on exactly the angle and intensity that the storm ends up being. I don't have a surge forecast at the moment. That will come in the coming days. Then there's the track and the winds and waves settle down. as we head through into Monday evening as the storm moves inland. I do want to mention that even as far away as Galveston and the Galveston coastline, we will see waves increase. Seas here will be running 1 to 3 feet above normal. And so we could see a little bit of inundation at times of high tides in low-lying areas, but really it's going to be a rip current and swimming threat for the Galveston coast. Rainfall potential, I mean, obviously a tremendous amount of rain is possible. Southeast Louisiana taking the brunt of it, easily in the 3 to 5, 5 to 7 rain total area there. Models are predicting we may see several inches of rain in Galveston near the coast. I'm not so sure about that. A lot of times the circulation brings in dry air and that cuts off the rain potential. I'm going with a slight chance for a scattered thunderstorm in Houston, Galveston. And then look at this. Significant rain and flash flooding threat as the storm drags the moisture from the Gulf of Mexico well inland. Memphis, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee could see 3, 5, 5 to 7 inch rain totals or more in spots. So it's another factor. We saw Fred come in a month ago, cause severe flooding across interior southeastern United States. In Galveston and Houston, local impacts from a landfall near New Orleans, we would get a light northeast breeze. It's just too far away to really impact us. Plus, we're on the weak side of that storm. We would be mostly sunny. We would be hot. There would still be a few scattered thunderstorms. And the greatest impacts will be wave activity and rip currents on the coast. That's where we stand right now. You've got questions. I will attempt to answer them. Facebook friends, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Our digital media, social media director extraordinaire, Randy Klein, is standing by. What's the first question, Randy?
Well, you just answered, I think, about half of them.
That's okay. You can throw them at me again. Yeah, people need to hear them again.
Okay. It's what's going to happen if it stays on the current course, what's going to happen to our area?
Okay, if it stays on its current course, what will happen to our area? And it is interesting because you've got a big storm just a couple hundred miles away, but we're on the weak side of it. We're on the clean side. So what we will end up getting is a north breeze, and that quite often just brings in dry air for us and zaps rain chances out. This is the wind field forecast. Here's our hurricane hitting near New Orleans on Sunday, and Houston getting an east that'll turn northeasterly as it moves inland. That brings in dry air. And the interesting thing, one of the most interesting things about these storms is even though they're hundreds of miles away, this is like dropping a pebble in a pond, and it sends out ripples, waves, you know, away from the center where that pebble dropped into the water. So even though it's that far away, we will see increased wave activity, and the biggest impact is dangerous swimming, especially for inexperienced swimmers. Those rip currents, when those waves push the water up on the beach, it can pile up, it can wait, and then it can all rush out at once, and you can get caught in that. That's a rip current, and you want to avoid that.
Okay. Ronel, R-O-N-I-E-L, wants to know what the chances are of it shifting further west and what's keeping it from shifting further west.
Raniel wants to know what are the chances of the storm shifting further west, that would be closer to us. Well, none of these forecasts are ever set in stone. What I watch for in particular is a trend. And what I have noticed over the past 3 days is the trend has been, every model run has been further east, further east, further east, further east. So the trend has been for it to make landfall further east with each and every run that's been coming in. So I think in this case the trend is Houston's friend in that it will take the storm, probably keep it away from us. I think we're getting a good idea of where it's going to go now. I'm much more confident in this forecast than I was last night. But again, nothing is set in stone, and so continue to monitor the forecast carefully. Great question.
Okay. How about flights? Cody wants to know, Cody is flying to Orlando on Sunday and wants to know if this would affect flights.
That's a good question. Cody wants to know about flights. He's flying from Houston to Orlando. You know, usually they can fly around these things. They may have to take a larger berth around it. In fact, they would probably go in that direction around the storm. But usually flights, they fly around the storm. It takes an extra hour or so, and they get it done. Remember, they can get up to the top of the atmosphere, way up here at 35,000 feet, out of the stronger winds. These are surface storms, so They'll fly around it or over it, and they'll probably get out. I don't see any significant weather in Houston to stop you from flying out of here unless we get a thunderstorm right over Bush Intercontinental Airport. So I think you're probably okay to make your flight.
Okay. Tracy wants to know if it's possible that Ida falls apart before it makes landfall.
Tracy wants to know if Ida will fall apart before it makes landfall. I wish it would. In this case, it looks like this is going to be a big hurricane. All the conditions are set in the Gulf of Mexico for rapid intensification, and it looks good for hurricanes out here right now. So I don't think this is going to fall apart, but I like the way you think. I wish we didn't have to forecast a storm like this for anyone across the Gulf Coast.
Okay. Fred wants to know what conditions are going to be like in Baton Rouge if it makes landfall on its current path.
Baton Rouge is going to have a rough day on Sunday. Who asked that question?
Fred Johnson.
Fred, great question. So Fred wants to know what are conditions going to be like in Baton Rouge on Sunday. So, for the entire state of Louisiana. So here's Baton Rouge, here's Lafayette, Morgan City, Covington, New Orleans, Galena, Biloxi, Mississippi is going to have a bad day on Sunday, especially because they're on the dirty side. But this storm is forecast to make a track right like this, right over Lake Pontchartrain. That's close to Baton Rouge. So you could see a tropical storm to hurricane force gusts as we head into Sunday evening. If the storm does take this exact GFS track, there's the center, 5 o'clock Sunday evening. Baton Rouge gets hurricane force winds. Mobile probably gets hurricane force gusts, and of course the closer you get to the center, they could be much stronger, over 100-mile-an-hour winds at that point as the storm moving inland. So it's going to be a rough go of it for everybody within 100 miles of the center of this storm.
Okay, and Danielle wants to know if there's a chance of the high pressures on either side shifting.
Danielle's asking about those high pressure domes on either side. Is there a chance they could shift? There is a chance. We don't know everything about how the atmosphere moves. These models are algorithms that some very smart people have put together and try to do our best to figure out how things will move in the future. But weather forecasting still has a large degree of uncertainty in it. So at the moment, it looks like this is a likely scenario, at least near New Orleans, for a landfall on Sunday, but it could easily be, in fact, just as statistically likely that Biloxi, Mississippi gets a direct hit, or Lake Charles is still in play for a possible direct hit. That's a good question.
And that looks, well, you got one on intensity.
Okay.
Just what you think it's going to be when it makes landfall.
Okay, so what will the intensity be at landfall? So right now the Hurricane Center is forecasting strong Cat 2, winds of 110 miles an hour sustained as it makes landfall Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. Forecasting the intensity of a hurricane several days out is the most difficult part of the forecast. That's the part we have not gotten nearly as good at as we have on getting the track. The track has improved tremendously, but the intensity is a tough one. There are just so many factors through that vertical atmosphere, and we just can't know all the initial conditions. We only know a few points of initial conditions, and so there is a chance that the intensity forecast could be well off. Usually in a setup like this, we end up under forecasting the intensity. It's possible it could become a stronger hurricane than we're currently forecasting. And believe me, that's what everyone is planning on, the possibility of that in New Orleans and Louisiana and southeast Louisiana and even into Mississippi tonight. Believe me, they're paying very close attention in Mobile, Alabama, as well as the Mobile Bay is very susceptible to a storm surge. So intensity, probably at least a strong Cat 2, maybe a Cat 3 at landfall.
Okay, and then Jennifer is asking about Beaumont.
Okay, Jennifer, so Beaumont is probably going to be okay on this type of a track. We'll take a closer look at this. So, if it were to make it on the far western side of the cone, here's Beaumont, there's Port Arthur. You guys are close. You would be on the weak side, but on that type of a track with this type of a storm, you could probably get gusts to near, maybe to hurricane force, probably more like 50 to 60 mile an hour gusts out of the north, if it were to end up on the far western edge of the forecast cone. So the closer you get to this cone, the more you need to be paying attention and making sure that you have your family's plan in place, because as we mentioned, this is not set in stone by any stretch of the imagination. Although we've gotten much, much better at forecasting the track. In fact, the size of this cone has shrunk In other words, we've gotten a tighter forecast, a better forecast cone. It has shrunk by 30% in the last 10 to 15 years. That's how much better we've got at forecasting where these things are going. But again, that intensity forecast is we've not gotten quite as good as that. That's where we stand tonight. We're going to get another update on the computer runs, the spaghetti plots, and a new advisory from the Hurricane Center at 10 o'clock. So our next live update on the storm will be on KHOU 11 News at 10 on the TV side with Len and Mia and Jason and myself. I look forward to seeing you then at 10 o'clock on TV tonight.